Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 5 years ago. Over 5 years ago, right? Beginning of the darn pandemic. Just to keep connected, telling each other stories. And it's been so much fun that we've been coming back pretty much every Wednesday ever since. And tonight, the fun continues. But it's a spooky kind of fun tonight. Our readers tonight are Anna Orridge, dialing in from very far away, somewhere very, very dark and quiet. And in a debut, Clay Vermulm. So if you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. We love to hear from you. And if you're joining us on YouTube, welcome. Enjoy the show without the pressures of socializing. So we do recommend this being the kind of show it is tonight, with the kinds of stories it is, that you really pay attention and watch the stories, and whatever you do, do not look behind you. It's really important. I mean, nothing to worry about, just do that, okay? So our first writer tonight is Anna Orridge. Anna Orridge lives in London with her family and works for an environmental charity. Her short fiction has appeared in Mislexia, the Gothic Nature Journal. Gosh, I don't know what that is, but I already want to subscribe. And the anthologies Rock Band and Rewired, published by Ghost Orchid Press. Her essay, Bihexuality in the Craft, is published in the Off Limits Press anthology, Divergent Terror. Her cosmic eco-horror novella, Fengaris, came out with Nefarious Bat Press in May 2025. Anna, welcome back to Story Hour.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back again. The story I'm going to read you tonight is called Babs, and it's from this collection, Good for Her, which is published by Nefarious Bat Press. I hope you enjoy it.
Beautiful cover. Could you hold that up again for a second?
Sure.
Ah, yes. I do love a nice Gothic script in a big girly pink.
Can't argue with that. And it's also a charity anthology in favour of Sisters Uncut.
That's
I know,
great.
it is an amazing name, isn't it? Thank you, Daniel.
And is there anything we need to know by way of content warnings?
I think that there is a reference to animal death, but it's domestic chickens, not pets.
Yes.
So I hope everyone will be okay with that.
All right. Well, we will just continue to watch you and the dark window behind you as you read your story.
Thank you. Babs. Rob Hughes sucked his teeth, staring at the bungalow. Who the hell would adorn their front garden wall with skulls? The skulls weren't real, of course, at least not the human ones. There were about a dozen of them, all the size of a fist. They had the look of the Dia de Muertos sweets he'd once seen on a TV documentary about Mexico. Their eye sockets were stuffed with fake plastic jewels. They'd been embedded in the concrete of the new front wall, like shells decorating a pretty little shingle house by the sea. There had never been anything pretty about that bungalow, in all honesty, a hunched red brick runt of a house. The farm was 3 miles from the village, which in its turn was a good 20 miles from Monmouth. The only way you could get anywhere without a car was by river. Perhaps that was how the new owner intended to get around, because he hadn't seen any vehicle other than the removal van that had shifted its load of furniture a few days ago. But a blue rowing boat had appeared yesterday, popped up on the rickety little jetty at the back of the house. Rob had been hoping for years that the biddy who used to live there would have a fall, or perhaps a stroke or heart attack. He didn't want her dead, mind, just something serious enough to get her moved on to a nice, comfy retirement home. That way he could buy that land up for a song, raise the bungalow and get something built there that would be a little bit more appealing for the second home city sorts. But the biddy ended up with a very aggressive form of cancer instead. It took her in a matter of months, and it seems she'd left the house to someone with a heavy metal fetish. Still, he hadn't given up hope yet. The inheritor, it seemed, was a young, hip sort. They probably thought that living somewhere like this would be a bit like camping at a festival. They might have romantic ideas about the Welsh countryside, but they'd be gone the second they got a whiff of heavy manure or realised there were no theatres or concert halls within pissing distance. Then Rob would be ready with a smile and his checkbook. He trudged closer to the wall. He was about to go and ring on the bell when he noticed more skulls perched on top of it. These were real ones, but clearly not human. Rob picked one up and raised it up to his face height. Used to be a barn owl, that one. The voice behind him was deep and feminine. It had a rich timbre that, for some reason, put Bob in mind of the halls of polished dark wood. Be careful, or it might swivel 180 degrees in your hand, give you a nasty shock. He turned to face the woman who had come out of the bungalow. She was leaning on one of the poles that held up the old porch. She looked almost as thin as the fucking pole, her blue velvet dungarees hanging off bony shoulders. Stretching long, tattoo-strewn arms above her head, she yawned and regarded him with laconic amusement. Help yourself. Feel free to pick another skull up. That's what they're there for. She lowered her arms, smoothing down her spiky green hair. Then she came padding barefoot towards him. It was hard to tell how old she was, perhaps mid-60s. She was certainly too old to be dressed like that, in Rob's view. Jesus! He put the skull back on the wall hurriedly. She smiled and nodded at the skulls. Good, aren't they? My own little memento mori chorus line. You often find the most innocuous little animals have the most terrifying, alien-looking skulls. How did you get hold of them then? He asked gruffly. Some of them are roadkill. Others were once my friends and pets. She picked up one of the skulls and planted a kiss on the cranium. This was my Patch, the cutest little guinea pig you ever saw. She laughed at Rob's look of revulsion. It's just a souvenir, sweetie. Not much different from keeping a photo. How do you get them clean? Oh, some I find already gnawed smooth by scavengers and bugs. Others I myself bury or put in an acid bath to clear away the rotting flesh and gristle. Rob rocked back on his heel and blinked. Fun hobby? She flashed him a grin, and Rob noticed she had a couple of iron fillings. Not at the back, but the front. Did this woman think she was a rapper or Jaws from the old Bond film or something? Those tattoos, bloody weird as well. He couldn't even make out pictures. They were just swirls, like fingerprints under a microscope or a labyrinth. He took a deep breath. Well, I'm your new neighbour, Rob Hughes. I thought I'd better introduce myself. That's my farm over there. He turned and gestured at the fields, the corrugated roof of the barn gleaming under the sun. What are you keeping in there, then? Chickens. Ah, figures. She shut one eye so quickly he couldn't tell whether it was some weird spasm or a wink. He coughed. I didn't catch your name. I didn't send it your way. There was a silence that was at least a couple of beats too long to be comfortable. I'm Babs, she said before flicking him a little wave and heading back to the porch. Babs. Barbara. That wasn't a name you saw in young girls any longer. He remembered from some lesson long ago that it meant barbarous woman. He smirked. The name fit her a lot better than those stupid dungarees. After Babs had arranged the furniture to her liking and got the beds in the gardens dug over and planted with the herbs she needed. She turned her attention to her rowing boat. It was time to get a sense for the waters here, find out what she could offer them. She pulled the boat across the jetty and lowered it down into the water. She closed her eyes as she put her feet in it. The feel of a river under old timber always sent a jolt through her. It was as if the wood was remembering the xylem veins that once shot through it, carrying water and nutrients. It was much the same sensation as when she felt pelt peel away from bone when she was cleaning a skull. That just rightness. She managed to sit down, and once she'd untied the boat from the jetty, she was swept downriver pretty quickly. For a while, she leaned back and let herself drift until she came a little too near a bank. The waters were lively, but as soon as she dipped the oar in, she knew all was not well. She was miles from Monmouth, but the water was murky as French onion soup. Her own throat constricted as she sensed the presence of fish far below. She felt their pain, the lesions in their scaly skin. Her eyes filled with tears. Years before, when she had visited Alison here, she could only feel their freedom and ferocity as the sunlight flashed on their silver bodies. Back then, all they had to fear were vigilant herons and the iridescent drafts, darts of kingfishers. But death from these predators would be a merciful release in comparison with the slow suffocation they would suffer now. The water did not just look like soup, it was near as dead as soup. A few days after their first encounter, Rob was surprised to find Babs leaning on the side jamb of his barn door. No dungarees this time, but a floor-length sky-blue dress, fluttering in the breeze. "All right there?" he asked, wiping his hands on his overalls. "Yes, not bad. I wanted to talk to you about something, though. I noticed you were keeping chickens near the banks of the river." Rob nodded. "Aye, free range. You look like the sort who'd be into that. Would you like me to deliver?" "I'm vegan, as it happens. In fact, I was a vegan chef when I lived in Cardiff." Rob tilted his head backwards in surprise. "Bit odd for someone who likes stripping skulls." "Not at all. All those animals died before I skinned them, and none met their deaths at my hands." Rob shrugged. He made his way over to his van. "Well, I'm going down there to feed the little buggers. You can come too if you fancy." He started to haul bags of seeds into the trunk. Once he'd finished, she wordlessly joined him in the passenger seat. It was a bumpy ride down to the riverbank. Draping an arm over the lowered window, Babs asked him how many chickens he kept. "Just over 200, as well treated as you could please. They have the life of Riley, out all day pecking at the ground, then tucked up nice and warm in the coop the rest of the time." "You sound defensive." "Got nothing to defend myself against." He pulled up next to the field. It overlooked the riverbank, surrounded on all sides by high chicken wire. The ground was a mire of mud in front of a large coop. The chickens' squawks and clucks puckered the air, getting louder as Rob hauled one of the sacks of grain out of the van. He scattered one with a wave of his hand, and the birds instantly flocked around the ark, pecking furiously. Babs stayed where she was, still leaning on the top of the van, her expression inscrutable. Rob made a gesture at the sack. "You fancy feeding the buggers?" She shook her head. He emptied the sacks over the fence and came back towards the van, rubbing his hands on his overalls. "I've seen you on your boat, out on the river. You're pretty handy with it, I have to say. Wouldn't expect someone your age to be that agile. No offence, like." "None taken. As I've been on the river, I've noticed that all is not well with the waters. There are algal blooms everywhere." "Well, if there are blooms, it can't be dead, can it? Lots of biodiversity, exactly like your sort like." "Biodiversity is life, but the algal blooms are choking the river. They're the result of excess phosphate. You know what's particularly high in phosphate, Rob? Chicken manure." Babs spread her arms out, her many bangles jangling in the wind. She looked down, pointedly. The ground around them both was covered in the distinctive murky white feces of chickens. Rob shrugged. "It's just as likely to be human shit. They're pouring it into the rivers all the time, aren't they? Blame the water companies. Blame the government. Oh, there's plenty of fault to be spread around, but why blame everyone but the farmer who's spreading chicken manure all over the fields next to the river? It's sacrilege what you're doing. La agua es vida." "Huh? Water is life." Rob warmed his hands on the cup before him and laughed. It's the bloody why. Never been exactly a model of purity, but it's fine. Look, Babs, I'm sure you mean well. But a man needs to fertilise his fields, and what better than the shit I've already got right here? I'm not changing it for anybody, and forgive me, I think a townie like you is a bit too, shall we say, chicken shit to do anything about it. Catch me? I catch you perfectly. Babs turned round and returned to the vehicle, primly gathering her skirt before she swung her legs in. Once he'd finished feeding the chickens, Rob picked up a black plastic bin liner on the field. As soon as he got in the car, he popped it in her lap. Look, sorry, I was a bit abrupt back there. I have a gift to make up for it. You'll appreciate this, I think. Babs looked inside. To do her justice, she didn't flinch, only closed her eyes. The dead chicken inside was already partly rotten, its dirty feathers like wilted toilet paper clinging to a wet floor. I thought you'd appreciate it, he said. I didn't kill it, in case you were worried. Got pecked to death by its friends. They're a very hierarchical lot, chickens. Anyway, I thought you might like to add it to your collection once you've buried it or dissolved it or whatever it is you do. Thank you. Why don't you drive us back to my house? I'm planning on cooking a nice meal. It was a fairly easy matter to strip the chicken's skull, since the decomposition was already quite advanced. Holding her breath in to avoid spelling it, Babs carefully dropped one of its eyes in the mortar. She was surprised it was still intact, orange iris glowing, with an oddly contained sort of light, like a candle viewed between the fingers of someone's cupped hand. Babs added just a scrap of the flesh. It could not be more than that, or Rob would notice the flavour. The beaker of river water was ready. Taking in a few drops with a pipette, she said the words. This eye has seen you. It has seen you, Rob Hughes, but you have not seen it. Now you will, whether you will it or not. The uninitiated thought spells were something you got out of a book with dusty pages, but Babs knew you needed to coax the power from deep within yourself, like a childhood hymn once sung in assembly halls, now forgotten. Bab's house was pretty much as bad as Rob thought it would be. All mirrors in driftwood frames and weird abstract pictures in psychedelic shades. It was like stepping into one of those new age shops for the tourists in Monmouth. All it was missing was the damn full key rings with the meaning of your name in faux Celtic lettering. It even had that clutching, stale stench of incense. She probably had all those weird little holders with it, smoking all over the place, essential oils and all the rest of that crap, doing the upward-facing hyena or whatever it was on some grubby mat every morning. He tried not to cough as Babs led him into the lounge. In all honesty, he was feeling bad about being rude to her earlier. They were never going to get on like a house on fire, but a neighbour was a neighbour. They went through to the lounge and Rob blinked a few times. There was a massive indoor cage in front of the window. It was all hung with wooden ornaments carved in the shape of long apple peelings, twirling away like a barbershop blood and bandages. In the middle of the cage was a table and two chairs. Rob hesitated before sitting down, and she laughed. Sorry, a bit off-putting. I'm not going to lock you up. That's my old aviary. I gave away the last of my birds and cleaned it out before I moved here. I couldn't bear to get rid of it. Too many memories. So I turned it into a feature, as people like to say. Just give me a moment. She went into the kitchen and came back after a few minutes with two mugs, both steaming. Rob looked down and sniffed. Oh, God, it's that green stuff, isn't it? I prefer breakfast tea. I don't like tannins. Just try it. You might like it. Rob shrugged and snipped it from it. Not a bad brew, actually. There was a flavour to it he couldn't quite identify, something both sharp and earthy. He put the cup down. Aren't you going to join me? In a moment. I'm just going to the kitchen to rustle up a treat for us both. A few minutes later, Rob heard the hiss of frying. He got up and had a look out of the window. The garden was pretty overgrown. Rather than mowing and pruning, Babs adorned the crumbling rock garden with twirling wind chimes and chipped gnomes. It wasn't long before she came out of the kitchen again with a plate full of what looked like fried chicken pieces with a side of barbecue sauce. I thought you were a vegan chef. This is as vegan as it comes. Chicken of the woods. It's a fungus I foraged yesterday, lovely and young and tender. Rob took a fork and skewered one of the pieces gingerly before putting it in his mouth. She wasn't wrong, actually. In terms of texture, it was very similar, and it soaked up the flavour of the sauce well. Not bad, Babs. But I'm afraid you'll never wean me off my roast chicken. Speaking of which, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. Need to get all the birds back in the coop before sunset. She smiled. Indeed, I would not want to distract you from your animal husbandry. There was an edge to that. She probably thought he was too stupid to pick up on it. At any rate, he tipped his cap to her before he left. Babs was quite surprised by how gently the water received her rowing boat. She was expecting to have to wrestle with it, but the river was compliant. Each stroke of the paddle a slight pull in their dance. She even closed her eyes as it bore her gently along. The river wanted this as much as she did. It deserved it. It was only once Rob had got the last chicken into the coop that he felt his bowels contract. It was way stronger than the usual stomach trouble, like some little wild beast fighting to get out of him. Fiddling with his belt, he was about to make a run for a clump of trees near the bank. Then he heard her voice. Bit squiffy, Rob, he gasped and swore. Babs was at the door of the coop, her long blue skirt trailing over the entrance. She had that same slightly detached amusement in her smile that had unsettled him when they first met. Something was clutched to her chest. What are you doing here? He demanded. And how did you get here so fast? She smiled. Bloody hell! He could have sworn she hadn't had as many metal fillings as that last time he looked. There's barely a white one in there. Sorry, he faltered. Didn't mean to be rude. You just shocked me. Did you leave something when we were out with the chickens? I never forget anything, Rob, and neither does the river. She closed her eyes, tilted her head back, and started to sing. At least, singing was the only way he could think to describe that sound coming out of her. It was like that final glug you hear when the last bit of water's going down the drain. Plump, wet, and satisfied. She swayed from side to side. Now he could see what she was holding. The cup she'd been drinking her tea from in her house. Realization shuddered through Rob as he felt yet another spasm in his gut. You old bitch, he shouted, lifting a finger at her. Those mushrooms you gave me were poisonous. Or you put something in that tea, didn't you? A laxative. She blinked. You say that the water in the river is fine, Rob, so why would it bother you to drink it then? Huh? You put fucking river water in that tea. Babs smiled. Not just river water, my pet. She closed her eyes again. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Rob's panic rose, but his unease was not just about this mad old biddy who clearly thought she was a witch. No. Why was there silence? None of the usual clucking or scraping you get from chickens that had just been fed? He turned round and round in disbelief. All the chickens were facing him, motionless. What have you done to them? What have you done to my birds? He turned back round to Babs, but she was paying him no mind. Her lips moved silently, her eyes closed. Rob was about to lunge for her, but then he saw something that almost whipped the air from his lungs. The lines of Bab's tattoos were twisting, warping. They made him think of a river's ripples in sunlight. He shook his head. It had to be those wacky herbs or mushrooms giving him hallucinations. I'll get you for this, he growled. Don't you think this is over? I'm not someone you mess with. He was about to make a run for his car, but Bab's voice suddenly rose in volume, almost to the pitch of a scream, only musical in its undulations. The chickens, as if as one, began to shriek and cluck along with her. He smacked his hand on the nearest cage. Shut the fuck up! Make them shut the fuck up! The noise was unbearable. Rob covered his ears with his hands, but Babs continued her chant. Stop, he begged, stumbling towards her. I will take the chickens back. I will put them in another field, away from the river. I will... Suddenly, he felt something burst from his belly. He yanked up his shirt and started trembling and gabbling. A bloom of overlapping bracket fungus was flowering from his belly button, but the caps weren't white or brown or orange. They were the moist, deep red of a gleaming worm. From the time he had spent with butcher friends, he knew that was the colour of the small intestines. Now there was that similar feeling of bulging activity in his ears, his anus. He clutched his face, weeping, but the chickens were clucking and shrieking again, drowning him out. They were rushing towards him. He covered his face, but multiple sharp beaks ripped at it, their wings flapping and claws scraping at him. He stumbled out of the coop, the chickens in pursuit. Bab's laughter reached his ears again. Is chicken shit now, Rob? She taunted. What are you doing to me? He shouted as he was driven down the muddy bank. I'm taking you to the river, Rob. Since you said it was okay to pour excrement into the waters, I thought I'd throw the biggest shit of them all in there. Bab sat down on the bank, her long skirt trailing in the water. Rob lay face down just a few feet away, his broad back bobbing as the current carried him. That fungus protruding from his ears, a rather odd, puffy white concoction, would certainly give the coroner something interesting to write about. There was no more clucking of chickens to be heard. They had all retreated back to the coop. She let her fingers drape along the river's surface. The great beast quivered and prickled in pleasure. The waters of life ready to be revived. Lifting her head, she breathed out. Most of her smiles were brief spasms. This one she let unfurl slowly. Thank you.
Ooh, and the river was well pleased. Oh my goodness. Hmm. There's a lot going on in there. But as I'm seeing in the chat, mostly just satisfied. Thank you very much, Anna.
Well, thank you so much for listening.
It is our way at Story Hour to just take a moment between the two readers to let the first story sink in, make sure it doesn't come bursting back out. Yes, ready ourselves for the next story. Everyone, that was Anna Orridge reading to us from a very dark, quiet place in a much less friendly time zone. Thank you, Anna. Our next reader tonight is a Story Hour debut, and that is Clay Vermulm. Clay Vermulm is a Montana-born, Washington-based author of horror and contemporary dark fiction. He has been published in Slay House Magazine, Writers Forum, Simile, and numerous anthologies. Clay studies under Richard Thomas and is the program coordinator for the Seattle Horror Writers Association, the editor of the Grendel Press imprint Sinister Soup, and of the annual Crypticon Seattle anthologies, and the host of two podcasts, Fermented Fiction and Beneath the Rain Shadow. When he's not writing, or apparently doing any of those other things, gosh, Clay enjoys hiking, climbing, surfing, and gaming with his wife and cat. Clay, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited too.
Yes,
So I understand you brought us a pretty special story tonight.
I did. So this story is called The Man in the Red Coat. It initially was in my first indie published anthology of short stories called Blue Rare and Other Short Stories. And it has since inspired an entire trilogy of novellas called The Voices from the Cold Trilogy.
Ooh. Cold. Is that one of our content warnings?
Cold would definitely be a content warning. If you don't like the cold, get a blanket. This one will not be for you. This is a ice climbing story. So there's also your typical, if you're afraid of heights, any of those outdoor adventure types of fears. Mild language. There is also a dead animal in this. It is a bear. And yeah, I think that's about it.
All right.
Bit of
Well, I think
violence.
I'm just the right amount of afraid of those things. Let's hear.
Perfect. Okay. The man in the red coat. Travis Jaden reached the summit of Mount Inspiration just as the sun reached its zenith. The route took him about 7 hours, excluding the 5-hour approach. The cloud cover, which had overcast the majority of the morning, was burning off, revealing the mist-veiled valley and sweeping ranges around him. He removed his cell phone from his pack and pushed the power button, hoping the cold hadn't froze the components. It wouldn't be the first time he'd pissed off his sponsors by failing to document a notable ascent. At the back of his mind, he heard his publicist chiding him. Videos, Jaden. People want videos. You've heard of a little thing called TikTok, right? Or do you not get cell service amongst your rocks? For a first ascent on the south face of Inspiration, I guess I better take a damn picture. The phone finally powered up and he turned the video on. Hey, Jan, Travis said into his iPhone 5 camera. Keeping that shitty phone for nearly a decade was another thing both Miranda, his girlfriend, and Jan hounded him about endlessly. No service up here, but it seems I can still take one of those videos you're always going on about. He flashed his most winning grin. I'm here on top of Mount Inspiration. Yee-haw! He shouted in exultation as he panned the camera around to show the Picket Massif to the east and west and the Cascades stretching towards the northern and southern horizons. And I got here by climbing that. He angled the camera over the edge, leaning out over the dizzying heights, seemingly without a care in the world, to show the sheer ice, rock, and snow face he'd just ascended. He returned the camera's focus to his face so the pinnacle of Inspiration Peak was visible over his left shoulder. I'm naming this route Miranda's Nightmare. Love you, baby. Again, he flashed a winning grin, then panned around one more time, this time keeping his bearded face in the frame as he let out an echoing lupine howl up to the midday sun. Now I just got to get down. He arched an eyebrow at the lens. And mountains. He arched an eyebrow at the lens, then angled the camera to the relatively low-angle ridgeline of his descent path. Wish me luck, he said, and stopped recording. That'd have to do for Jan. TikTok videos were capped at 10 seconds, so the way he saw it, he just created 2 weeks of content. Enough to collect a paycheck, right? Besides, accomplishing the climb was his real goal. The interviews with rock and ice and outside were what would put his name into the hat for a real rock documentary, not his fucking TikTok. With a sigh of relief, Travis turned his phone off and stored it back in the depths of his pack where it would be happily forgotten. He drew out the rope harness and figure-8 belay device, sat down, geared up, then stood to sling the rope over his shoulder and begin the slow plod down the snow field. The rocky ridge arched like the spines of some colossal slumbering dinosaur, weaving downward towards the valley floor. Hiking down the increasingly steep slope, Travis sank to his knees in the deep snow with every step, forcing him to pull his feet nearly to his chest for the next stride. By the time he reached the granite spires of the rise, where he could use the sparse gear he'd packed for a rappel, his core and thighs were aching as if he'd run a marathon. He took a few moments to breathe the spring air, CO2 puffing out in wispy clouds. He let the thin, biting cold oxygen fill his lungs before continuing his journey. Twisting a large ice screw into a thick plate of ice, he secured his 120-meter static line to it and ran each side of the rope through the figure-8, using a small length of cordelette to create a backup prusik in case something should cause him to lose hold with his brake hand. After testing the security of his system, he stepped over the edge and dropped toward the waiting glacier. Travis hit the snow at the bottom of the wall about a quarter mile to the east of where he'd begun his climb. As he pulled and coiled his rope, he surveyed the glacial traverse that awaited him. Glaciers were parts of the mountain nobody ever talked about. Even mountaineers didn't usually bother warning others about the dangers of glaciers because until you'd been on one, it didn't compute. When inexperienced eyes looked out over a glacier, they see a relatively flat plain with some icy ridges and rises that protrude from the snow. Compared to a sheer mountain face, 2,000 feet above the safety of solid ground, a glacier doesn't look particularly impressive or intimidating. What inexperienced eyes don't see is that glaciers are peaks between the mountains, under the snow, often stretching downward thousands of frozen feet. Tucked beneath the more prominent features of the surrounding valley, the glaciers hide, silently waiting to swallow the unwary. When Travis looked out over a glacial field, he felt a bit nervous. A small part of him worried about the high probability of an accident. He knew many a skilled mountaineer had fallen into a crevasse or been in a glacial valley due to a crushing avalanche. No matter how good an alpinist, there was little to nothing they could do in those situations. He packed everything into his bag, strapped on his mountaineering boots and crampons once more, and pulled out his collapsible trekking poles. With another deep breath, he headed out. Just as he reached the ice's edge, he stopped. A large black shape stood on all fours in the middle of the glacier. As Travis stared, it seemed to notice him. It turned towards, standing up on two hind legs as if to gain a better view. A bear? This time of year, bears could be a seriously bad news, as they would be ravenous from hibernation. Travis didn't know a hell of a lot about bears. He'd seen a few in his years among the mountains, but he'd never had any close or frightening encounters. Too small for a grizzly, it looked like a black bear, but it was still larger than he was comfortable with. He looked down the valley, trying to focus on his destination. Just get moving. It'll take off, he assured himself as he crunched out onto the hard ice of the glacier, trying not to think about the bear. He prodded the ground before him with his trekking poles, taking each step deliberately where he found solid ice. The Terror Glacier had always been a relatively crevasse-heavy glacier, but with rising temperatures over recent years, the ice had begun to melt at faster rates. Like a still patch of river has fast-moving currents and undertows hiding beneath, a snowy glacier often belies treacherous 600-foot canyons that terminate in caverns of broken stone and subarctic pools. Travis knew that what felt like a solid patch of ground could sometimes be a cornice no thicker than an inch, only still in place because no one had been idiot enough to walk across it for centuries. If you happen to be said idiot, well, you might be going for the last big ride. Prod, step, and so it went as he made his sluggish way across the ice, all the while keeping his eyes on the hulking black bear that hadn't moved since standing to face him. The very fact unsettled Travis. He started to wonder if it was one of those life-size decoy animals people put in their fields. It'd be a hell of a job to hike out here just for a prank that no one's likely to see. I guess people do weirder things. But he had seen it moving before, hadn't he? Thoughts of crazy people and hungry black bears fresh from hibernation continued to loop through his head as he drew nearer to Washington's largest land-based predator. He'd had enough wilderness training to know the general rule of thumb for a brown or grizzly was to play dead and hope it lost interest. For a black bear, get big and scare it off. This was something he'd heard experts say, never had to put in practice, thank God. Any other time he'd seen a black bear, it had been from a ways off, and as soon as it saw him, the animal would move. Of course, most of those other times, the bear had been in a more populated area. So why is this damn thing still here? Maybe he doesn't know how dangerous humans can be. To punctuate that thought, Travis stowed a trekking pole reaching over his shoulder and snagged one of his ice axes. Holding the wickedly curved, razor-sharp instrument gave him a sense of security. Though he had no idea how effective his axe would be against his Ursine opponent, he'd make it pay if it wanted him for dinner. As a lover of fantasy fiction, he had always harbored a secret desire to go down fighting with axes high against some seemingly unbeatable foe. Upon nearing the bear, though, the world melted away. All he heard was his heavy breathing, the clicking of his crampons, and the crunching of his trekking pole as it plunged through the snow to find footing. On his last prod, the most crucial connecting with solid ice sound was chillingly absent. He stopped and took a deep breath. He poked to the right, to the left, searching for a path forward. The bear was still there, frozen as a statue now, only 200 yards to his right. He prodded farther left, finding a bit of ice, took a cautious step, but was forced to stop again. As he searched the path before him, he realized he was all but surrounded by a hidden gap beneath the snow. Shit. Had he stepped onto one of the thin courses he'd just been thinking about? His gut clenched as the reality of having no control over what was beneath sank in. The difference between him making it out of these mountains and plummeting into an icy chasm to his death sat upon the balance of an indeterminably stable shelf of ice. Travis took a few deep breaths, focusing on what he could control. He had footing beneath him, solid ice behind. One step after another, and he'd be back on track. He took a few backwards, scouting the left edge of the cornice, though he continued to find nothing but loose snow which crumbled into open air. The mountaineer glanced again at the bear, at the direction he'd be forced to walk. Well, I hope Yogi isn't feeling feisty over there. Yogi certainly didn't look feisty. He looked fucking dead. I'm convinced I saw that damn thing moving before. Travis wasn't sure which was more intimidating. Reluctantly, he started walking towards the creature, maintaining his attention to footing. The path to his right began to solidify. Why did you have to stop right there, you creepy bastard? 200 yards became 100. As he neared the beast, he started to realize that its muzzle and underbelly were splotched and stained with a reddish brown. The bear also had a large portion of its face missing on the left side. A gleaming white section of jaw and broken teeth was visible through tears in its greenish, rotting flesh. 100 yards became 50. The creature seemed to stare at him with unblinking black eyes. Or were they staring through him? Maybe this thing really was dead. Implausible as that seemed, with it sitting tall on its haunches, maybe it had passed from the realm of the living right before his eyes. Just as he was finished with that thought, it cocked its head. "Please don't," a woman's voice begged. The timbre was weak, exhausted, desperate as it trailed off like a fading echo. The voice paralyzed him. Bile rose in his throat. He would have dropped his axe were it not tethered to his wrist. He was only reminded of its existence when it swung down and poked into its leg with its sharp point, causing him to flinch back to reality. "Please don't," the creature repeated, as it dropped to all fours and faced him. No exhalations puffed forth from the partially decayed jaws of the monster, yet it made deep huffing noises as it stalked toward Travis. Its heavy paws sank deep into the powder, generating alarming creaks in the ice below. "Hey!" Travis shouted, holding his axe and pole above his head. He waved them, extended his arms to make himself look larger. The neon red of his jacket flashed brightly in the sun. "Get back! Stay back!" "Please don't." The bear continued forward, with that slight tilt of its head, dead eyes, surrounded by mangy, flaking skin and fur coated in what Travis was now sure was dry blood. "Oh, fuck," he thought, as the bear turned its slow stalk into an increasingly quick lumber, closing the distance between them faster than he thought possible. Frantic, Travis didn't think. He just reacted. Axe held high, he waited until the bear was a foot away and swung where he estimated the creature's head would begin. It still plowed into him, hurling him back into the snow and ice with a sickening crunch. Vision swimming, Travis tried to gasp, but he could get no air into his empty lungs with the terrible weight of the creature atop him. The beast, luckily, was not gnashing him with tooth and claw. It was not rending his flesh from his bones or smashing his rib cage into splinters. With its 2 tons of muscle, it wasn't moving at all. Travis heaved and shoved and squirmed his way free from the bear's girth after an arduous struggle. By the time he emerged from beneath the reeking creature, he was forced to lie in the snow, panting, before he could gather the energy to stand and consider whatever the hell was going on. Did that just happen? He realized. It had indeed. Somehow he didn't even seem to have broken anything, other than his trekking pole. Holy shit, I actually did that. His one strike had connected perfectly with the center of the bear's skull. The axe sunk so deep that even after several straining, wrenching attempts to remove his trusty tool, he was forced to leave it embedded between the beast's eyes. As his adrenaline ebbed, he began to gasp the disturbing reality. None of this makes any sense. In all his years up here, he'd never seen a bear, not once. Even stranger was the fact that no heat steamed off the newly made corpse. It lay there stiff and still. Already, it seemed as if it had been dead for days, especially with its appearance of decay. Despairing at the loss of an axe he'd carried up countless summits, Travis was nonetheless itching to get as far from this strange creature as he could. He turned and started following the bear's tracks across the snow towards the far edge of the glacier at a fast clip. Still cautious, Travis prodded the crevasses and took mindful steps, but the assurance that his forward path had already been tested by a fully grown bear allowed him to move with more speed and confidence. As he blinked tears from his eyes and his breathing stabilized, the red haze of adrenaline faded. 500 feet and I'll be off this damn glacier, free and clear. He set the goal firmly in his mind and focused his vision forward until... Please don't. Travis froze. Cold sweat burst from every one of his pores as he slowly turned around. The bear was standing on two legs this time. It approached at an impossibly fast bipedal sprint, the axe still jutting from its head. As it picked up greater speed, it dropped to all fours and loped. Travis screamed, turned, and took off in a desperate dash, still following the tracks. Without realizing, he dropped his trekking pole in the snow. Unfortunately for the seasoned mountaineer, there was no preparing for a circumstance like this. The tracks didn't lead to the edge of the glacier. Instead, they led to a yawning crevasse he didn't see, the gaping icy blue canyon stretching down in the depths of the glacier and spanning at least 20 feet across. Suddenly he was leaping, for all he was worth, but such maneuvers only work in movies. His hands weren't remotely strong enough to arrest the velocity of a fully committed plummet towards the earth, and Travis barely had a chance to scream as he vanished into the blue void below. In the mountains, miraculous things happen sometimes. Sometimes, seasoned veterans are killed by random rockfalls. Others fall into ice caves with floors covered in jagged, broken spears of ice and survive. Somehow, Travis had landed in one section of the crevasse that was full of soft, fluffy powder. Improbably good as his landing had been, it had not saved him from grievous wounds. When he tried to stand, a jolt of agony lanced up his leg and spinal column, and he dropped back down. He lay on his back, gritting his teeth almost hard enough to splinter, and sucked in a violent breath before screaming. The cry echoed off the icy walls, resounding as if in an empty theater. It was dim and silent in the crevasse. A deep oceanic blue seemed to glow from the walls. Travis could scarcely make out a thin slit of light streaming into the corridors of the glacial cavern, but even that seemed to be fading. He studied the waning light, wondering how long he'd been here. Concerned he'd passed out at some point, and knowing he might need to be rescued, he reached into his pack and searched for his cell phone. Ironically, the thing he hated bringing to the mountains above all might be what saved him. When he found it, however, he could tell it was pulverized. It fell into 3 pieces as he extracted it. Travis let out a manic laugh, which transformed into the desperate sobbing of a doomed man. As he lay there alone, hoping to freeze to death before that bear, or whatever the hell it was, found a way to get down to him. The bear never showed up. Neither had the freezing to death. Travis had no idea how long he'd been at the bottom of that cave. Somehow, some way, he was still alive. He remembered reading the story of Joe Simpson, a man who'd fallen into a crevasse in the Andes and managed to climb out and descend the mountain on his own without the use of one of his legs. If he could do it, maybe I can too. That'd be a story to secure his place in local climbing lore. He wouldn't have any trouble pleasing his sponsors if he could pull off a miraculous survival story. Axes high, he thought, as he willed himself to his feet. Well, he tried. He was able to get weight onto his left foot, but putting any amount of pressure on his shattered right sent a crippling pain throughout his body like a blast from a taser. He could tell by the sickening angle of his leg that it was broken in at least 2 places, but right now, all he had time to focus on was trying to get out of here. Determined, he pulled his remaining trekking pole from his pack and used it to lever himself onto his good foot. He shivered uncontrollably as his blood started to flow once more, inching his way slowly, using one wall of the ice canyon for support. He squeezed through a narrow gap in the ice and rounded a small bend, searching for any feature or slope he might be able to ascend with his limited gear in this weakened condition. It was then Travis realized the light he was seeing had not come from above. It was coming from the narrow corridor in front of him. A pale bluish-white glow seemed to emanate around the next bend. He supposed it was possible for a crevasse to lead to the bottom of a glacier, somewhere near the ground, though he'd never heard such a thing. A way out. He knew a huge glacier like the Terra had networks of tunnels beneath its icy surface, and he hoped against all odds that maybe he'd fallen into the exact right spot for survival. Rounding the corner slowly, he saw a flash of movement from inside the large chamber before him. Travis stopped in his tracks, leaning against the wall. He stilled his breath to listen. He heard faint voices. It sounded like several people speaking in frantic, confused, or desperate tones. He identified at least 7 distinct voices. As he took another step, his head swam with a concoction of pain and delirium. He could hardly see for the dots and flashes of white and black that flooded his vision. Each step felt like breaking the leg all over again. He wished he could just hack the damn thing off and be done with it. Shuffling further into the opening, Travis scanned the chamber. It was tall and semicircular, almost too perfectly shaped to be carved by nature. The faint light he'd seen was glowing from within this room. It seemed from within the very walls, and as his vision cleared and his eyes slowly adjusted to the mysterious light, he saw the vague silhouettes of several figures standing around the edge of the chamber. The conversation increased the longer he peered into the room. No, not a conversation, just 7 or 8 voices repeating phrases. "Please help me," a man's voice shouted. "Why are you doing this?" asked an older sounding woman. "You," said a man with dreaded recognition. "Hello?" Travis asked, hesitantly stepping around the corner. Part of him wanted to hide, but a larger part, the part that ached to see Miranda again, to hug Jan and laugh about his stupid video, that part wanted desperately to survive. These were people. They could help him. All the voices stopped when he entered. Travis's stomach dropped in terror. He saw the people standing around the cavern, all of them looking as dead as the bear above. He wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to do anything, but he was frozen, transfixed, and from behind he heard heavy footsteps. "Please don't." That's it.
I have to say, I love horror where the environment is part of the threat. Because, I mean, I've never been glacier climbing, but I've been cold enough that I can see how that could be the big scary thing in and of itself.
Very
With-
chilling.
Yes, you jerk. I mean, without the zombear and the oh,
Bear.
zombear, yes. Oh
Well,
my
thank you.
gosh, that's harrowing. And it makes a good ending, but I can see why you would want to expand from there too. So that's kind of cool that we have kind of a choose your own adventure, and either that's a complete story or it's the beginning of a novella, or maybe both.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
little bit of both, perhaps. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And how interesting, Daniel, we both had some environmental stuff going on today.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, Anna's obviously had the environmental stuff with the pollution, and then global warming is changing a lot with the glaciers and making them more dangerous, right, Clay? So, yeah, I thought that was kind of part of what I was seeing. Fun night, Daniel.
Really fun night. Thank you
Yeah.
both so much.
Thank
Fun
you. It's
night
an
as
honor to be
well.
here.
Always an honor to have a debut too. I'm so glad to have you back too, Anna. I don't know how you do it from your time zone, but I'm just grateful. So
Enjoyed the Clay stories.
I loved yours too, Anna.
Um,
It was awesome to listen to. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
and next week is going to be completely different again. Our readers will be Douglas Gwillim and Mar Vincent. I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of, just to see if there are any changes. And that's also a good place to learn about upcoming authors, and the recordings page is full of handy links to programs you may have missed. You can also browse the Story Hour page on YouTube, which is almost completely stocked with their 5 years of Story Hours now. So, I mean, gosh, what's holding you back? And also, if you subscribe to Story Hour, you'll never miss a new story, and you're not going to get a whole lot more alerts when we upload the old ones, because they're almost all there already. Now is the time, everybody. Anna Orridge, Clay Vermulm, thank you so much for a really fun evening. I'm trying not to say chilling now that Daniel's put it into my head. An eerie unsettling evening.
Indeed.
Yes. And thank you, Daniel, for not only the puns, but starting Story Hour so we could all be here 5 years later enjoying these stories together. And thank you to our readers. If I haven't said that already, I should have. And thank you to those of you watching, those of you in the Zoom right now chatting, those of you watching on YouTube at some point in the future. Thank you for joining us around this virtual campfire on this story glacier, and especially for not looking behind you, although it should be safe once we've signed off. Good night.